What if I told you that the people who should love you most, your own parents, could betray you in the most soul-crushing way imaginable? What if I told you they could erase you from a milestone moment, a moment you meticulously planned, all for someone else? My name is Sarah, and what happened to me wasn't just a betrayal. It was a demolition of everything I thought I knew about family. Every single expectation, every ounce of trust, shattered into a million pieces. Picture this. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks before my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. 50 years. Half a century. A golden milestone. For 2 years I had poured my heart and soul, every spare moment, every extra dollar, into planning the most spectacular, unforgettable anniversary trip for them. I'd researched, negotiated, and dreamed. I had booked them a luxurious cruise through the Caribbean, a dream vacation they'd always talked about but never thought they'd experience. Imagine the shimmering turquoise waters, the gentle ocean breeze, the exquisite dining, all designed to celebrate their enduring love. I'd even arranged for a surprise renewal of vows ceremony on deck, a moment I envisioned bringing tears to their eyes, a memory etched forever. I remember the excitement, the anticipation building inside me. I'd spent countless nights poring over brochures, reading reviews, comparing itineraries. I'd called travel agents, negotiated discounts, and even secretly bought them new luggage. This wasn't just a gift, it was a labor of love, a testament to my gratitude for everything they had sacrificed for me. I wanted to give them the world, or at least a magnificent piece of it. That Tuesday, I was bubbling with excitement, ready to finalize the last few details. I planned to surprise them with the full itinerary at a special dinner that weekend. I even had a custom-made photo album filled with mock-up pictures of their cabin, the dining rooms, and the exotic ports of call. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. My heart swelled, thinking it might be a casual check-in, maybe a hint about what kind of cake they wanted for a pre-trip celebration. But the words that flashed across my screen weren't casual. They weren't loving. They weren't even remotely kind. My breath hitched, a cold knot forming in my stomach as I read them. My mom's message was short, brutal, and utterly devoid of emotion. Sarah, Tiffany's taking your place. We're going with her. Tiffany, my cousin. The same cousin who had always been the golden child. The one who effortlessly excelled at everything, the one my parents constantly compared me to. Tiffany, who had never lifted a finger to help anyone, let alone them. Tiffany, who had barely spoken to them in years. My place? What did that even mean? My mind reeled. Had they forgotten all my efforts, all my planning? All the money I had already paid? The shock was so profound it felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air left my lungs, my vision blurred. I reread the text hoping it was a typo, a cruel joke, anything but reality. But it was there, stark and undeniable. Tiffany was taking my place. In that single, agonizing moment, the shimmering turquoise waters turned to a murky black abyss. The gentle breeze became a howling gale, tearing at my insides. The luxurious dining felt like ashes in my mouth. My parents, the two people who had nurtured me, raised me, taught me about love and loyalty, had just casually discarded me like an old receipt. They didn't even have the decency to call. A text message. For a 50-year anniversary trip I had spent 2 years planning. The betrayal wasn't just about the cruise. It was about years of feeling second best, of constantly striving for their approval, of always falling short in their eyes compared to Tiffany. This wasn't just a trip, it was validation, a chance to finally feel seen, appreciated, loved by them. And they had snatched it away, replacing me with someone who hadn't earned it, someone who hadn't given a single thought to their happiness. A slow, burning heat started in my chest, spreading through my veins. It wasn't just sadness. It was a raw, visceral rage, a resentment so deep it tasted like metal. How could they do this? How could they be so utterly cruel? The image of them sailing away, laughing with Tiffany, while I was left behind, shattered, ignited something dangerous within me. I wasn't just hurt. I was wounded, and a desperate need for justice. For them to understand the magnitude of their actions, began to consume me. What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. And trust me, you won't believe how far I was willing to go to make them see. The email landed in my inbox at 7 03 a.m., an innocuous ping that shattered the quiet morning. It was from my parents, the subject line simply reading, "Anniversary trip update." A warm wave of anticipation washed over me. For months, I had poured my heart and soul into planning their 30th anniversary getaway to Maui. Every detail, from the boutique hotel with the ocean view suite to the private catamaran tour at sunset, had been meticulously chosen to create the perfect, unforgettable experience. This trip wasn't just a gift. It was my way of saying thank you for 3 decades of unwavering love and support. A tangible expression of my deep gratitude. My name is Alara Vance, and I believed in grand gestures. I clicked it open, a smile already forming, expecting a gushing thank you or perhaps a minor question about the itinerary. Instead, 2 lines of text glared back at me, stark and brutal, instantly freezing the blood in my veins. "Alara, we've decided to go with Tiffany instead. She's taking your place for the trip." The words felt like a physical blow, a cold, sharp blade twisting in my gut. Tiffany. My cousin Tiffany. The same Tiffany who had spent our entire lives trying to one-up me, who had always viewed my achievements as personal affronts. My smile evaporated, replaced by a gaping void of disbelief. My parents, the 2 people who had always championed me, who had always made me feel seen and valued, had just casually handed off my labor of love to someone else. My hands started to tremble, the phone suddenly feeling heavy and alien. I reread the email, searching for a hidden meaning, a joke, anything to soften the blow. There was nothing. Just those 11 words, delivered with the emotional weight of a grocery list. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated dismissal. My mind reeled, trying to process the sheer audacity, the callous disregard for my efforts. I had spent countless late nights researching, comparing prices, calling hotels, enduring endless hold music to secure the best reservations. I had even used a significant portion of my savings, money I had earmarked for a down payment on my own apartment, because I wanted this to be truly special for them. The initial shock gave way to a searing wave of resentment. How could they do this? How could they so easily erase my months of dedication, my financial sacrifice, and replace it with a single flippant sentence? The image of my parents, usually so warm and appreciative, morphed into something cold and unrecognizable. This wasn't just about the trip, it was about the complete lack of respect, the casual way they had discarded my effort. My chest tightened, a knot of anger and hurt forming deep inside. Tiffany, with her perfectly coiffed hair and her endless stream of passive-aggressive compliments, would now be enjoying my meticulously planned vacation. The thought made my stomach churn. I tried to call them, my thumb hovering over their contact, but I couldn't. What would I even say? Why did you betray me? The words felt too dramatic, too raw, even for the hurricane raging inside me. Instead, I paced my small apartment, the pristine itinerary I had printed out for them lying mockingly on my coffee table. Each glossy photo of a sun-drenched beach, each bullet point detailing a romantic dinner, twisted the knife deeper. This was more than just a canceled trip, it was a profound personal affront. It chipped away at the foundation of trust I thought I had with them. The resentment began to morph into something darker, something more resolute. This wasn't just an oversight, it felt like a deliberate slight, designed to hurt. Tiffany had always been their golden child, the one who never ruffled feathers, the one who always followed the path of Leah. Sent resistance. I, Alara Vance, had always been the dreamer, the one who dared to be different, often clashing with their more traditional views. Had this been their way of punishing me for not fitting neatly into their mold? The thought ignited a slow, burning fire in my veins. As the morning wore on, the initial sting of betrayal hardened into a cold resolve. I wasn't just going to stew in my anger. This wasn't going to be another instance where I swallowed my hurt and moved on. This time, something had fundamentally shifted. The emotional stakes had been raised, not just for the trip, but for my entire relationship with my parents, and, by extension, with Tiffany. This was a challenge, a declaration of war disguised as a polite email. I looked at the pristine itinerary again, not with sorrow, but with a new, dangerous glint in my eye. They thought they could replace me, erase my efforts, and hand over my hard work to Tiffany without consequence. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. The email's blunt dismissal had sliced through me, leaving a raw, gaping wound. My initial shock morphed into a simmering fury. How could they, my own parents, be so utterly blind to Tiffany's manipulative nature? She had always been the golden child in their eyes, the sweet, innocent cousin who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was often seen as too intense, too ambitious, too much. Now, Tiffany was poised to steal the very gesture I had poured my heart into, a gesture meant to bridge the subtle distance that had grown between us over the years. This wasn't just about a trip. It was about a lifetime of subtle slights, of being overshadowed, of constantly feeling like I had to earn my place. I remembered the countless times Tiffany had swooped in, taking credit for my ideas in school projects, charming teachers into overlooking her blatant plagiarism, even somehow convincing my grandmother that her lopsided, barely edible cake was superior to my perfectly baked, intricately decorated masterpiece. Each instance, a tiny paper cut, now festered into a deep infection. This Maui trip, my grand gesture of love, was merely the latest, most egregious example of her insidious pattern. My parents, in their naive adoration of Tiffany, had become unwitting accomplices in her latest conquest. The anger, cold and sharp, began to crystallize into a plan. I wasn't just going to stew in resentment. I wasn't going to politely accept their decision. They wanted Tiffany to have my trip? Fine. But it wouldn't be the idyllic escape I had meticulously planned. No, it would be something else entirely. My mind, usually a chaotic swirl of creative ideas, now focused with laser precision on a single objective to ensure Tiffany's dream vacation was anything but. My first step was to revisit the meticulously planned itinerary, every booking, every confirmation, every special request I had made. The Ocean View Suite? I remembered the hotel manager, a kindly woman named Brenda, mentioning a smaller, less desirable room on a lower floor that sometimes became available for last-minute changes. A flicker of an idea ignited. The private catamaran tour at sunset? I knew the owner, a gruff but fair man named Captain Kai, who had a strict cancellation policy but also a soft spot for repeat customers. I had been a repeat customer, booking several excursions for friends and family over the years. Tiffany was not. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing out a carefully worded email to Brenda. I explained, with a practiced sigh of disappointment, that unforeseen circumstances required a change in our reservation. I emphasized the need for a less prominent room, hinting at a sudden, unexpected desire for privacy. I even threw in a casual mention of a slight budget constraint that had recently emerged. Brenda, ever accommodating, replied within minutes, confirming the switch to the smaller garden view room. A room that, while still comfortable, lacked the breathtaking ocean vista I had originally secured. One down. Next, Captain Kai. This required a more delicate touch. I called him directly, my voice laced with a concocted blend of regret and urgency. I apologized profusely for the last-minute change, citing a sudden severe allergy that had developed, making the open ocean an unbearable prospect for the original guest. I lamented how much I had looked forward to the sunset cruise, playing on his sympathy. Then, with a carefully timed pause, I suggested that perhaps, if another party was interested, he could rebook the private tour, but only if it was for a slightly earlier, less picturesque time of day. Say, mid-afternoon, when the sun was harsh and unforgiving. Captain Kai, always pragmatic, agreed. A private tour was a private tour, even if the timing was less than ideal. He'd rather fill the slot than lose the revenue. 2 down. The gears in my mind whirred, each successful alteration fueling my resolve. This wasn't petty revenge, it was a reclamation. They had tried to erase my effort, to replace me with Tiffany. But they couldn't erase the detailed knowledge I had amassed, the connections I had forged, the meticulous planning that had gone into every single aspect of this trip. I knew the intricacies of every reservation, every hidden clause, every unwritten rule. This was my creation, and I was simply redecorating. My parents remained blissfully unaware, sending me perfunctory texts about their excitement, completely oblivious to the subtle, yet significant changes I was orchestrating. They were too busy basking in the glow of Tiffany's feigned gratitude, too caught up in the illusion that she was somehow making their anniversary even more special. The irony was almost palatable. They thought Tiffany was taking my place, but in reality, I was simply ensuring she inherited the carefully crafted consequences of their decision. This was just the beginning, and I was enjoying every single delicious step of the process. The first phase of my plan, the initial setup, unfolded with chilling precision.
My parents, completely oblivious, continued to gush about Tiffany's sudden interest in their anniversary trip. They sent me excited texts, detailing her wonderful suggestions for activities completely, unaware that every single one of those suggestions had been meticulously planted by me weeks earlier, during what I now called the information gathering phase. I had subtly steered their conversations with Tiffany, feeding her ideas disguised as casual observations.
Oh, Mom, wouldn't it be lovely if you two could try that new fusion restaurant near the resort? I'd say, knowing full well Tiffany would parrot it back to them as her own. Brilliant discovery. They ate it up, every last crumb of it. My phone, once a source of dread, became a tool of silent observation. I monitored their group chats, watching Tiffany weave her web of false sincerity. She was a master of performative enthusiasm, her messages peppered with exclamation points and emojis, painting a picture of selfless devotion. So excited to make this trip extra special for you two, she'd text, while I knew she was secretly gloating, convinced she'd won some imaginary competition. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, but it fueled my resolve. This wasn't about winning, it was about revealing. The real challenge began when the pre-trip planning shifted to practicalities. Tiffany, predictably, began to stumble. She had no real understanding of the intricate bookings, the carefully negotiated upgrades, the specific nuances of the itinerary I had built. She'd call my parents, feigning confusion, asking them to clarify details she should have easily grasped if she had genuinely taken over the planning. My parents, bless their naive hearts, just saw it as Tiffany being thorough. I saw it as the first cracks in her carefully constructed facade. One afternoon, a text from my mom popped up. Tiffany says the catamaran tour is booked on the wrong day. Can you check your notes, sweetie? She's so confused. My heart did a slow, triumphant roll. This was it. This was the opening. I had intentionally booked the catamaran for a specific day that I knew would conflict with a minor, but easily overlooked detail, a local festival that shut down a major road leading to the marina. Tiffany, in her rush to take over, had simply looked at the calendar and assumed. She hadn't bothered to check the fine print, the local events, the very things I had spent hours verifying. I typed a reply, my fingers dancing across the screen. Oh, Mom, I remember that. It's because of the annual Maui Pineapple Festival. The road to the marina gets completely closed for the parade. I specifically booked it for the day after so you wouldn't get stuck in traffic. It's all in the detailed itinerary I sent you months ago. I attached a screenshot of the festival schedule, complete with the road closure notice. My message was polite, helpful, and devastatingly precise. I didn't accuse Tiffany, I simply presented the facts, allowing her incompetence to speak for itself. A long silence followed. Then a series of rapid-fire texts from my mom. Oh, Alara, you're right. Tiffany completely missed that. She's so flustered. She said she'd rebook it, but now the private tour is full. A small, satisfied smile touched my lips. The private tour, of course, was fully booked. I had ensured that too. It was a unique, highly sought-after experience, and I had secured the last available slot months ago. Tiffany, in her haste, had tried to move it without checking availability, assuming she could simply wave a magic wand. The next call was from my dad, his voice tinged with a frustration I rarely heard. Alara, what's going on with Tiffany and these bookings? She just called me in a panic, saying the hotel changed your ocean view suite to a garden view because she tried to adjust the dates. I thought you had everything locked in. My breath hitched. This was a new development, one I hadn't orchestrated. Tiffany, in her desperate attempt to cover her earlier mistakes, must have fiddled with the hotel reservation, perhaps trying to impress them with her negotiating skills, and inadvertently messed up the room type. A wave of unexpected anger washed over me, a sharp, hot surge that cut through my calculated calm. This wasn't part of the plan. My parents deserved that ocean view suite. I had fought tooth and nail for it, leveraging every loyalty program point, every connection I had. Tiffany's blundering incompetence was now actively diminishing their experience, not just exposing her own flaws. My revenge, I realized, was becoming less about exposing Tiffany and more about protecting my parents from her destructive meddling. The game had shifted. "Dad," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "I'll look into it immediately. I had everything confirmed, in writing, months ago." This shouldn't be happening. I hung up, my mind racing. Tiffany had crossed a line. My initial plan was to let her trip over her own feet, to let her reveal her true colors through her inability to manage the complex arrangements. But she was actively sabotaging my parents' trip, not just her own reputation. This wasn't just about vindication anymore, it was about damage control. And a new, sharper edge to my resentment began to form. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about active destruction. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tiffany wasn't just incompetent, she was actively malicious. My initial thought had been to let her trip over her own feet, to let her reveal her true colors through her inability to manage the complex arrangements. But she was actively sabotaging my parents' trip, not just her own reputation. This wasn't just about vindication anymore, it was about damage control. A new, sharper edge to my resentment began to form. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about active destruction. My phone buzzed with an urgent text from my mom. "Alara, the hotel just called. They said our reservation was canceled, and the catamaran tour too? What's going on?" My heart plummeted. Tiffany had done it. She hadn't just fumbled the ball, she had spiked it into the ground and walked away. The meticulously planned itinerary, the one I had spent months perfecting, was unraveling before my eyes. My parents, who rarely asked for anything, were now caught in the crossfire of Tiffany's petty jealousy. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted into a full-blown inferno. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting my parents from Tiffany's toxic wake. I called the hotel immediately, my voice tight with a forced calm. The concierge, bless her heart, was apologetic but firm. "Yes, Ms. Vance. The reservation under your parents' name was indeed cancelled by a Miss Tiffany Miller. She explicitly stated she was a family member and wished to move the dates, but then never followed up." My blood ran cold. Tiffany hadn't just cancelled, she had impersonated me, or at least someone authorized, to dismantle everything. The audacity, the sheer nerve of it, was breathtaking. She wasn't just trying to take my place, she was trying to erase my efforts entirely, to make it seem as though I had never planned anything at all. A cold, calculated resolve settled over me. This wasn't a game I could afford to lose, not when my parents' happiness was on the line. I spent the next few hours frantically trying to salvage what I could. The Ocean View suite was gone, booked by someone else weeks ago. The catamaran tour, a sunset cruise I knew my dad had always dreamed of, was fully booked for their dates. Tiffany had left a trail of destruction, a scorched earth policy designed to ensure that even if I somehow got my parents back on that trip, it would be a pale imitation of the dream I had created. The betrayal felt even deeper now. It wasn't just that my parents had chosen Tiffany over me, it was that Tiffany was actively destroying the very thing they were supposedly going to enjoy. She wasn't just taking my place, she was ensuring there was no place left to take. My resentment solidified into a burning obsession. I wasn't just going to get my parents their trip back, I was going to make sure Tiffany paid for every cancelled reservation, every ruined detail, every moment of stress she had inflicted. I started digging. Not just into the trip details, but into Tiffany herself. I remembered whispers from family gatherings, hushed conversations about her business ventures that never quite materialized, her uncanny ability to charm people out of favors, leaving them in the lurch. My aunt, her own mother, had once confided in me about Tiffany's manipulative streak, her tendency to leave a trail of chaos wherever she went. I had dismissed it then as a mother's worry, but now, it resonated with chilling clarity. Tiffany was a master of deception, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and my parents, in their naive trust, had invited her right into the fold. My search led me down a rabbit hole of online reviews, public records, and even a few disgruntled former partners who had been swindled by Tiffany's schemes. The picture that emerged was far more sinister than I had imagined. Tiffany wasn't just a petty rival, she was a serial opportunist. Someone who saw every relationship as a transaction, every person as a means to an end. My parents were just her latest unwitting victims, and I was not about to let her get away with it. The more I uncovered about Tiffany, the more enraged I became. She had a history of taking advantage of people, of promising the moon and delivering dust. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. My initial anger at my parents for choosing her began to shift, slowly, imperceptibly, into a fierce protectiveness. They weren't just being unfair to me. They were being actively exploited by someone they trusted. The sting of their rejection still lingered, but a new, more powerful emotion began to take hold, the unshakable determination to expose Tiffany for what she truly was. I knew I couldn't just confront her directly. She would deny everything, twist the narrative, and probably turn my parents against me even further. I needed proof, undeniable evidence of her deceit. I needed to build a case so solid, so irrefutable, that even my parents, blinded by their misplaced trust, would have to see the truth. The Hawaii trip was just the tip of the iceberg. Tiffany's actions were a symptom of a much deeper, more insidious problem. I wasn't just fighting for a vacation anymore. I was fighting for my parents' peace of mind, for their financial security, for their very perception of reality. The obsession grew, consuming my waking hours. I compiled screenshots, call logs, email chains, anything that documented Tiffany's interference and deceit. I cross-referenced dates, times, and names, building a meticulous timeline of her sabotage. The closer I looked, the more glaring her manipulations became. She hadn't just canceled the reservations, she had actively tried to redirect the payments, to pocket the refunds, all under the guise of managing the trip. This wasn't just about a vacation, it was outright fraud. I envisioned the moment I would present my findings, the look on my parents' faces as the truth dawned on them. It wouldn't be about gloating, it would be about liberation. It would be about setting them free from the web of lies Tiffany had spun. The emotional stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings, it was about their well-being, their hard-earned money, their trust. The path ahead was clear, albeit fraught with emotional peril. I would expose Tiffany, not just for my own vindication, but for my parents' sake. The confrontation was inevitable, and I was ready. My parents, initially defensive, had finally agreed to meet, albeit separately from Tiffany. I knew this was my only chance to lay bare the truth, to untangle the web of deception that had ensnared them. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I walked into the quiet cafe, the same place where I'd first shared my Maui plans with them, brimming with excitement. Now, the air was thick with unspoken tension. My mother, usually so effusive, barely met my gaze. My father sat stiffly, his arms crossed over his chest. I took a deep breath, pushing down the surge of resentment, and began. I didn't yell, didn't accuse, not at first. Instead, I started with the trip itself, detailing every painstaking step of the planning, the late nights, the endless phone calls, the joy I'd felt envisioning their happiness. I spoke of the specific hotel, the ocean view suite, the catamaran, the small, personalized touches that only I, their daughter, would know they'd appreciate. I painted a vivid picture of the dream I had crafted for them, the dream they had so casually discarded. Then, I shifted. I pulled out my phone, displaying the dozens of text messages from Tiffany, each one a subtle dig, a manipulative suggestion, a thinly veiled attempt to undermine my efforts. I showed them the fabricated screenshots, the doctored emails, the manufactured evidence of my supposed negligence. I had painstakingly compiled every piece of her deceit, cross-referencing dates and times, highlighting the inconsistencies. My voice remained steady, though a tremor ran through my hands as I navigated through the digital proof of Tiffany's calculated malice. My mother gasped when I showed her a particularly egregious text, one where Tiffany had subtly suggested I was too busy with my own life to truly care about their anniversary, implying I was merely going through the motions. My father's jaw tightened as he saw the falsified hotel confirmation, complete with a significantly inflated price, designed to make him believe I was overspending their money. The silence in the cafe grew heavy, punctuated only by the clinking of distant coffee cups. Then came the clincher. I played them the recorded phone call, the one where Tiffany, thinking she was speaking only to her accomplice, had gloated about how easy it was to manipulate my parents, how she had played them like a fiddle. Her voice, dripping with smug satisfaction, filled the small space, recounting how she'd convinced them I was unreliable, irresponsible, and ultimately, uncaring. She laughed, a chilling, dismissive sound, about how she was going to enjoy my trip, on my dime. all while I was left stewing in my own self-pity. My parents' faces, previously etched with defensiveness, slowly transformed. Disbelief gave way to shock, then to a dawning horror. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shame and fury. My father's face, usually so stoic, crumpled. The realization of Tiffany's betrayal, not just of me but of them, hit them with the force of a physical blow. The silence was deafening, the truth hanging in the air, undeniable and devastating. My mother started to cry, soft, choked sobs that tore at my heart. My father pushed back his chair, the scraping noise loud in the quiet room. He stood, pacing a few steps, then turned to me, his eyes filled with a pain I'd rarely seen. "Alara," he began, his voice hoarse. We had no idea. She was so convincing. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. I simply looked at them, my own emotions a chaotic storm of hurt, vindication, and a profound sadness for what had been lost. This wasn't just about a trip anymore. It was about trust, about family, about the insidious nature of manipulation. The image of their faces as Tiffany's voice echoed through the cafe, mocking their naivete, was burned into my memory. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as she clasped mine. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We are so sorry. How could we have been so blind?" Her remorse was palpable, a stark contrast to the casual dismissal of her earlier email. My father sat back down, running a hand through his hair. "We need to fix this," he said, his voice firming with a newfound resolve. "We need to see all Tiffany. Right now." The anger in his voice was clear, directed not at me, but at the cousin who had so cruelly exploited their love and trust. The confrontation was over, but the fallout was just beginning. The truth was out, and its reverberations would shake our family to its core. The phone call to Tiffany was a maelstrom. My father, his voice a low, dangerous rumble I'd rarely heard, laid out the facts. He didn't accuse. He simply stated, detailing the trip's cost, the emotional labor, the betrayal. Tiffany, initially defiant, spewing a torrent of excuses about how I'd always been the favorite, how this was her chance to finally shine, eventually crumbled. The weight of her deception,
Exposed.
in the stark light of day, became too much for her carefully constructed facade. She tried to backtrack, to minimize, but my mother, usually the calmer of the two, cut her off with a chilling finality. "Tiffany," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth, "you didn't just steal a trip. You stole trust. You stole family." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by Tiffany's ragged breathing on the other end. She had nowhere left to hide. The grand gesture she'd attempted to claim as her own had backfired spectacularly, revealing the ugly truth of her character. It wasn't about the money. It was about the insidious nature of her envy, the way she had preyed on my parents' good nature, twisting their affection into a weapon against me. The call ended, not with a bang, but a whimper from Tiffany, a broken apology swallowed by the disconnect. That night, my parents came over. The air between us was still thick with unspoken pain, but beneath it, a fragile thread of understanding had begun to form. My mother, her eyes still red-rimmed, took my hand. "Ilara," she began, her voice trembling. "We were so foolish, so blind. We wanted to believe the best in her, and she exploited that." My father nodded, his face etched with regret. "We never meant to hurt you. We didn't see it coming." Their admission wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of their own vulnerability, their own misjudgment. It was a step towards rebuilding, not just my trust in them, but their trust in themselves. The Maui trip, of course, was cancelled. The thought of it, tainted by Tiffany's treachery, held no appeal. Instead, we spent the next few weeks in a different kind of healing. We talked, truly talked, for the first time in years. We revisited old memories, not just the joyful ones, but the challenging ones too. The moments where miscommunications had festered, where unspoken resentments had taken root. It was raw, often painful, but it was necessary. We peeled back the layers of our family dynamics, examining the patterns that had allowed Tiffany's manipulation to take hold. The path to justice wasn't about public shaming or grand pronouncements. It was quieter, more profound. Tiffany was cut off, not just from family gatherings, but from the casual interactions, the birthday texts, the holiday greetings. The silence from our side was her punishment, a stark reflection of the void she had created. Her attempts to reach out, initially desperate, then pleading, eventually dwindled to nothing. The family, once fractured, began to mend. But it was a different kind of family now. One forged in the crucible of betrayal and rebuilt on a foundation of brutal honesty. The bittersweet closure came not from a triumphant, "I told you so," but from a quiet sense of peace. I had confronted the source of my pain, forced my parents to see the truth, and in doing so had reclaimed my own narrative. The lessons learned were etched deep. The importance of clear communication, the insidious nature of unchecked envy, and the profound strength found in confronting difficult truths. I realized that true revenge wasn't about inflicting pain on Tiffany. It was about healing myself, about setting boundaries, and about reclaiming the love and respect that had been so carelessly discarded. The scars remained, a reminder of the battle, but beneath them, a stronger, more resilient Alara had emerged. The grand gesture, in the end, wasn't the trip to Maui. It was the arduous, painful journey back to myself. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant hum of the hotel's air conditioning. My parents, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and disbelief, stared at the printed itinerary I'd just laid on the table. It wasn't just any itinerary. It was the meticulously planned, fully paid anniversary trip to Hawaii, complete with private excursions and a surprise luau. The same trip they'd casually handed over to Tiffany, their new favorite, without a second thought. "What is this, honey?" my mother finally managed, her voice a fragile whisper. My father, usually so boisterous, looked as though all the air had been sucked from his lungs. I watched them, a strange calm washing over me. The resentment that had festered for months, the betrayal that had cut so deep, the obsession that had consumed my every waking thought, it all culminated in this single pivotal moment. "This," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me, "is the anniversary trip I spent months planning. The one I saved every penny for. The one I was so excited to give you." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The one you gave to Tiffany." Their eyes darted from the itinerary to my face, then back again, as if searching for an explanation, a trick, anything but the stark reality laid bare before them. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for the document, her fingers tracing the bold letters of Hawaii. But we thought—" "Tiffany said she'd planned something for us," my father stammered, his usual bravado completely absent. The irony was almost unbearable. They had believed Tiffany, the newcomer, over their own daughter, the one who had always been there. "Did she now?" I asked, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. "And what exactly did Tiffany plan? A last-minute dinner at a chain restaurant? A gift card to a discount store?" I knew the answer. I had seen the paltry gift basket Tiffany had presented them, a stark contrast to the dream vacation I'd orchestrated. The color drained from their faces as the pieces clicked into place. The truth, raw and undeniable, settled between us. My mother's eyes welled up, but this time there were no crocodile tears. This was genuine remorse, a dawning realization of the depth of their oversight, their casual cruelty. "We are so sorry," my mother choked out, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. My father reached for her hand, his own eyes reflecting a profound regret. "We made a terrible mistake. We took you for granted." The words, though long awaited, didn't bring the immediate surge of triumph I had anticipated. Instead, a bittersweet ache settled in my chest. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about recognition, about finally being seen. "You did," I agreed, my voice softening slightly. "You always have. The years of feeling overlooked, of playing second fiddle, of being the reliable one who never complained, it all came rushing back. This wasn't just about the trip, it was about a lifetime of unspoken grievances." "What can we do?" my father asked, his voice thick with emotion. I looked at them, truly looked at them, perhaps for the first time in a long time. The anger, the hurt, the sense of betrayal, it hadn't vanished completely, but it had receded, replaced by a quiet understanding. The justice I had sought wasn't about punishing them, but about reclaiming my own worth. You can start by acknowledging that I matter, I said, my voice firm but not accusatory. That my efforts matter. That I'm not just someone you can push aside when someone new comes along. They nodded, their expressions solemn. It was a small victory, perhaps, but a significant one. The trip to Hawaii remained mine. I had already booked it for myself and a close friend, a decision made in the throes of my initial resentment. I didn't want their apologies to taint the experience. The path to healing wouldn't be instantaneous, nor would it be easy. But in that moment, as the silence returned, no longer deafening but contemplative, I felt a flicker of hope. The emotional arc of my journey had reached its bittersweet closure. I had learned that my worth wasn't dependent on their approval, and that sometimes the most profound acts of justice are simply speaking your truth, even when it's painful. The conflict was resolved, not with a bang, but with a quiet understanding, and a new, stronger sense of self.